It's a bit surprising. We talk about things like imaginary numbers, and this isn't imaginary. This is real.
This is very real. I'm surprised, actually, at the fact that something so abstract is being used in such a concrete way. As strange as it may seem, the code provides us with an astonishingly successful description of our world. Its most ethereal numbers have starkly real applications, and its patterns can explain one of the most profound processes in nature: how living things grow. This is a picture of something I've been fascinated by ever since I became a mathematician. It's an X-ray of a marine animal called a nautilus. And this spiral here is one of the iconic images of mathematics. Now, while I've seen pictures like this hundreds of times, I've never actually seen the animal for real. At Brooklyn College, biologist Jennifer Basil keeps 5 of these aquatic denizens for her research into the evolution of intelligence.
So we keep the animals in these tall, dark tanks because they're naturally active at night and they like darkness. They live in deep water. And they also like to go up and down in the water column. That kind of makes them happy. So we give them the 5-star treatment here.
Right.
So this is number 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, big eyes.
Yeah, they have huge eyes. They're great for seeing in low light conditions.
Right.
Here's that beautiful shell.
Yeah.
The striping pattern helps them hide where they live.
I've never seen the animal before inside the shell. What is it?
They're actually related to octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish. It's a little bit like an octopus with a shell. And what's amazing about them is that their lineage is hundreds of millions of years old. And they really haven't changed very much in all that time. So we call them a living fossil. So it's just a really great opportunity to look at an ancient brain, ancient behavior, and they're a wonderful way to study the evolution of intelligence.
So are these guys intelligent then?
Some are smarter than others. Like, that's number 4. He outperforms everybody in all the memory tests, and he's quite active all the time. He's quite engaging. If you put your hand in the water, he comes up to you. Whereas number 3, who happens to be a teenager, is, I guess you would say, shyer. You put him in a new place, and he just sort of attaches to the side and sits there.
I'm interested in the shell as a mathematician, but what does the nautilus use the shell for?
Well, I think the most obvious use is protection. They also use it for buoyancy. They only live in the front chamber, and all the other chambers are filled with gas and with some fluid. And by regulating that, they can gently and passively move up and down in the water like a submarine. And then the really cool thing they can do is they can actually survive on the oxygen in the chambers if there's a period of time where, for some reason, oxygen goes down in the ocean. So it's one of the reasons they've lived for so long, for millions of years. It's a really great adaptation. The shell is really amazing.
But perhaps even more remarkably, the rules this ancient creature uses to construct its home are written in the language of the code. The nautilus shell really is one of the most beautiful and intricate structures in nature. Here you can see the chambers. This is the one where it lives, and these are the ones that it uses for buoyancy. At first sight, this looks like a really complex shape. But if I measure the dimensions of these chambers, a clear pattern begins to emerge. Now, there doesn't seem to be any connection between these numbers, but look what happens when I take each number and divide it by the previous measurement. So if I take 3.32 divide by 3.07, I get 1.08. Divide 3.59 by 3.32, and I get 1.08. Take 3.88 and divide by 3.59, and I get again 1.08. So every time I do this calculation, I get the same number. So although it's not clear by looking at the shell, this actually tells us the Nautilus is growing at a constant rate. So every time the Nautilus builds a new room, the dimensions of that room are 1.08 times the dimensions of the previous one. And it's just by following this simple mathematical rule that the Nautilus builds this elegant spiral. And because many living things grow in a similar way, these spirals are everywhere. The rules nature uses to create its patterns are found within the code.
Obviously, quite bothered by something.
Behind the world we inhabit, there's a strange and wonderful mathematical realm.
They're actually related to octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish.
They're quite ticklish. The numbers and connections at its heart describe the processes we see all around us. Bear with me, alright? But the code doesn't just contain the rules that govern our planet. Its numbers also describe the laws that control the entire universe. For centuries, we've gazed out into the night sky and tried to make sense of the patterns we see in the stars. To take a closer look, I've come to Switzerland's Sphinx Observatory. Perched precariously on the Jungfrau Mountain. At nearly 3,600 meters, it's one of the highest peaks in the Alps. And after the sun has sunk below the horizon, it's a great place to gaze at the stars. Well, it's a really clear night, so you can see loads of stars. There's Sirius over here, the brightest star in the night sky, and then right here, really recognisable constellation, which is Orion.
So have people always picked out Orion as a significant pattern in the night sky?
Well, it seems like different cultures all picked out that group of stars as being a significant one, and they all have different legends about it. So the Egyptians associated it with Osiris, their god of death and rebirth. Other cultures also grouped them together. A Native American tribe called the three stars of the belt, the three footprints of the flea god, and one group of Aborigines in Australia called it the canoe. Today, we don't need legends to explain the patterns in the stars, because we know their precise positions in space. And we don't just know where they are now. We know where they were yesterday, and where they'll be millions of years into the future. So the Sun and all of the stars in our galaxy, including the stars of Orion, are all moving in orbits around the centre of the galaxy. But a bit like a swarm of bees, although they're all moving in roughly the same direction, they all follow their own paths. And that means that their positions in the sky will start to change as thousands of years tick by. And now we're 2.5 million years in the future, and the constellation of Orion has completely gone. And in fact, thousands of years ago, our ancestors would have seen different patterns in the sky, and our descendants millions of years in the future will also see different patterns.
The reason we can predict how the stars will move into the far future is because we've uncovered the rules that govern their behaviour. And we found these rules not in the heavens, but in numbers. It's only through the code that we can understand the laws that govern the universe. Laws that describe everything from the motion of the planets to the flight of a projectile.
When you watch the fireball fly through the air, then it appears in the first part of its flight, when it's just left the trebuchet, that it's accelerating upwards. And then it begins to slow down before it stops just above me, and then finally accelerates back down towards the ground.
But if you analyse the flight using numbers, it reveals something rather surprising.
When you plot a graph of the projectile's vertical speed against time, then you get a graph which looks like this.
To start with, the projectile is travelling upwards, so its vertical speed is positive, but decreasing. As it reaches the top of its arc, the vertical speed becomes negative as the fireball turns round and falls back to Earth.
Because the graph is going like this, it means that the projectile, from the moment it leaves the trebuchet, is actually slowing down. So at no point during the flight is it ever accelerating upwards.
Throughout its flight, the fireball is in fact accelerating downwards towards the Earth at a constant rate. Something you would never realise simply by watching it fly through the air. And this is a profound truth about one of the fundamental forces of nature. Gravity.
Drop, throw, fire or launch anything you like, a rock, a bullet, ball or even a pot plant, and it will accelerate towards the ground at a constant rate of 9.8 metres per second per second. This is a fundamental law of gravity on our planet, but it's only revealed by changing the flight path of the object into numbers.
Appreciating this simple fact about how gravity works on Earth is the first step towards understanding gravity everywhere. It's the foundation stone of Newton's law of universal gravitation. A mathematical theory that could describe the orbits of the planets, predict the passage of the stars into the distant future, and has even enabled humankind to step foot on the moon. The laws that command the heavens are written in the code. call them doormats, the large ones.
2.5 million years in the future.
This isn't imaginary, this is real. This is real.